The first Devil May Cry game came out 1 month after some Arabs mistook a plane for a camel's butthole, piled inside, and ruined fun for everyone for the next 10 years, marking Devil May Cry as one of the few games made in the early 2000s that lacked a cynical edge, over-the-top war propaganda, or a shoehorned-in political message. Unfortunately, cynicism crept into the second game, and political fluff into the fifth, forever marking the franchise as a mixed bag in terms of quality. Over the years, fans have clamored for one more try from the original devs, and before we speculate on the likelihood of a sixth Devil May Cry, it may be beneficial to revisit the 5 games we already have. Part 1, Devil May Cry, released in 2001. In Devil May Cry, you play as Dante, an albino J-rock enthusiast who wears the kind of coat that looks good when you buy it on eBay, but when it finally arrives 2 months later, you realize that not only do Koreans have a wider spectrum of animals they find it appropriate to harvest leather from, but also that a Korean men's size large is equivalent to an American girl's size small. But you try to look on the bright side of things, wheeze into it and have your mama drop you off at the mall, but wind up getting cornered in the food court and beaten to a pulp by a bunch of little girls who spit on you, call you emo bitch baloney nips, and run off with your coat, making it so you can't so much as even inhale the sweet, pungent aroma of a distant orange Julius stand without breaking into a cold sweat and embarrassing erection. That, and he looks like what every greasy teenage boy born in the 80s thought they looked like, when in reality, they looked like this! While Dante is a pretty cool guy, his machismo masks so many mommy issues that not only does he wear his dead mother's jewelry, he literally gets penetrated by a clone of his mother in the opening cinematic, and she doesn't even spit on the shaft first. Nasty! Though I don't blame Dante for wanting to smother his other mother with his steaming nutter butter, Trish is so delish that even the elaborate gothic architecture gets a throb on the knob when she's on the job. DMC retained some vestigial components left over from when it was supposed to be a Resident Evil game, from the creepy levels, the atmospheric music, to the goofy writing. You probably won't understand what the fuck is going on your first time through Devil May Cry, and when you'll do, you'll like it, but you'll also wonder why they spent so much time having you trash talk a fondue spider, and so little time explaining that Dante has an estranged brother. Gameplay-wise, while I can appreciate the complete absence of quick time events, the basic combat system is a little lacking. Later entries in the series allow you to choose from different fighting styles, and gave you a larger variety of weapons to choose from. In this initial installment, you get 3 swords that might as well have been different forms of the same blade, and a pair of gauntlets that allow you to give the roughest fistings to ever exist this side of Mike Tyson's bedroom. A powered-up devil form and taunt that helps fuel it keep the gameplay mostly fresh despite the small variety of bosses and enemies you encounter. You fight each boss at least 3 times, but some of the fights are completely optional, and the structure of the fights changes enough to keep them from going stale. These bosses include Dante's brother dressed up like a complete idiot, a bird that poops laser beams, and a boss that I can only assume was inspired by Hideki Kamiya passing a kidney stone in the dark. Regular enemies include pizza-cutting puppets, ice cube lizards, room temperature lizards, retards with their balls hanging out, and Japanese boyfriends. Whether you're juggling enemies with pistols in order to keep your style points high, or blowing them to bits with a grenade launcher, the variety of guns at Dante's disposal helps keep dealing with the regular enemies interesting, but lack any variety in terms of a moveset. The biggest problem with this game, however, is its complete lack of a level select feature. Almost every other entry in the franchise allows you to replay levels you've already beaten on higher difficulties at your discretion. In this original Devil May Cry, you're forced to play through on normal first, using low-level equipment against low-level enemies, then once more on hard, before you can reach the most rewarding difficulty, Dante Must Die mode. As you play, you can upgrade Dante's moveset and health in exchange for orbs that look like social justice warriors the moment Donald Trump became president. In theory, this makes for a fun experience where advanced play is rewarded with new moves, but in practice, it means that the first half of your first playthrough is a little dull due to a lack of options in your moveset. Devil May Cry is also a swimming and platforming game at times, and the jumping mechanic works well, save for when the non-interactive camera changes angle on you mid-jump. Then you might as well try jumping up your own butthole for how poorly the mechanic works. Overall, Devil May Cry is an interesting little game, While I wouldn't put it on the same level as the third or fourth entries in the franchise, it serves as a solid starting point for newcomers. Give it a chance, and maybe, just maybe, it'll fill your dark soul with light! Part 2, Devil May Cry 2, released in the year 2003. No matter how much time you spend laying awake at night, or soaking your head in the shower, you cannot change the past. All those blunders, mistakes, and unacknowledged children are set in stone. But we humans have an amazing power, the ability to forget. We rewrite history in the books we teach to children and raise them on a foundation of soothing lies. So tell me, why does Devil May Cry 2 continue to exist? I remember walking 5 miles to pick up my copy on the day of its release, then walking another 5 miles home. I sold my blood and sperms to pay for that game, which, due to a horrible jazzercising accident, I have no choice but to donate at the same time. I suffered through 2 hours of what I can only call gameplay due to a lack of a better word, before making another 10-mile round trip to return that vegetized diarrhea. Actually, now that I think about it, there is a better word to describe my first foray into the eldritchian horrors of Devil May Cry 2. That word is butthole stank! Sometimes there are consoling explanations behind the cause of tragedies, like when a baby is born with Down syndrome, it's due to the mother swallowing a penny, giving the fetus the first taste of its soon-to-be lifetime favorite food. So I wonder, what occurred during the conception of this game to make it go so wrong? From the first minute of Devil May Cry 2, you might be fooled into thinking it was going to be great. Dante flips around the fully 3D environment like a thalidomide baby on a trampoline trying to fuck a football, and can even run on walls like that guy from The Matrix, you know, Christopher Reeves. But then you realize that, like Christopher Reeves, you have no control over where you look, and that the snap to wall run activates constantly when you're just trying to move faster than the speed of smell. The smell of butthole stank, to be exact. Dante has zero forward momentum in combat or while running. Moving him across the map is like pushing a turd uphill with your dick, and the always-on auto-aim causes you to target walls and floors rather than the enemies and switches right next to you. Though you start with a double jump, you can no longer engage in meaningful aerial combat since enemies fly away if you try to hit them. To make up for this, Dante's guns are now overpowered, and since Dante functionally only has one melee weapon with just 5 moves, the melee combat is near useless. Making this worse is the fact that the only difficult segment of Devil May Cry 2 is the fight you'll have trying to stay awake while playing it. Some old enemies and bosses return from the original game, but with their charm and difficulty removed. At times, Devil May Cry 2 feels less like a complete game than a mission pack, where the objective of every mission is to have a bad time. Regular enemies stand around, waiting for the suffering of taking part in this game to end. Most bosses can be killed by mashing buttons like a fat bitch sitting on a Nokia phone. Platforming returns in as mangled and half-assed a form as every other aspect of the game. Most platforms lack snap to jumping, and since you can't affect your direction mid-air, reaching certain items and switches is like trying to arc a piss over your own head. Graphically, Devil May Cry 2 is a real treat for the eyes, if your eyes enjoy the visual equivalent of butthole stank, that is. Most enemies look like the designers figured you would drop the game before reaching them. Fortunately, half of the levels are so dark that you won't be able to see them. Unfortunately, the level design rarely informs you of where to go, and when you get there, you'll wish you had stayed where you were. At no point will you know what the fuck is going on, but thankfully, the gameplay is so bad, you probably won't care. The second disc of Devil May Cry 2 contains a couple of new, painfully slow, underwater levels, 2 new cutscenes, and some chicken-headed hoe who has the exact same moveset as Dante. I don't know who helps this half-Jamaican, half-Irish, all-Aspergian cum-sleeve dress in the morning, but she's somehow even dumber than she looks. Every time she opens her mouth to speak, you'll wonder if it's possible to sound more like she strangles small animals for fun, and she ups the ante every time. If the game were a little longer, she'd probably degenerate to communicating exclusively via spit bubbles and queefs. You can also unlock Trish as a playable character, but that would require subjecting yourself to Devil May Cry 2 more than twice. Bosses include a tank that can't hit you, a helicopter you can't hit, a puddle of AIDS, Count Japula, and what I can only assume is the fallout of an experiment in polygonal inbreeding. Overall, Devil May Cry 2 is an embarrassment that can't be fixed without turning it into something completely different. Even the Western-made Devil May Cry is better. I don't get why they don't just quietly write it out of existence. Like the CDI Zelda games, Resident Evil Gaiden, or Rosemary Kennedy. With luck, the brain tumor I have grown thanks to playing Devil May Cry 2 will eventually cause me to forget it ever existed. Or at least kill me soon. Thanks for your time and goodbye! Part 3. Devil May Cry 3. Released in the year 2005. Potential developers of Devil May Cry 6 take note. If you want to come back from a public embarrassment on the level of Devil May Cry 2 or DMC Devil May Cry, you have to go absolutely fucking insane. The fun-hating, life-weary lesbian-looking Dante of the previous game is gone. This younger, Down syndrome haircut-having Dante is a smartass who starts jukeboxes like the Fonz, throws crazier pizza parties than John Podesta, and manages to pull off the leather jacket but no undershirt look that personally left my nipples so chafed you could have mistaken them for two throbbing raspberry muffins. While the central plot of Devil May Cry 3 serves to clear up the mystery behind Dante's conflict with his brother over whose daddy issues are the strongest, everything else is written according to a very simple rule. Why does this Korean frozen dinner turn into nunchucks when killed? Why does Clown Nuts do the Charleston when you shoot at him? And why is Lady dressed like the kind of back alley prostitute who could suck the metaphysical smegma from your soul? Because it's fun. The naked vampire lady who takes shots to the womb better than my mom did back when I was just 3 months old isn't meant to be a political statement about the sexualization of women. The Leviathan that swallows Dante whole is not an allusion to the wide-scale hunting of whales by half-starved Japanese sailors who would otherwise have to choose between eating octopuses or having sex with them. Nor is it an allegory to the predation of plus-sized, body-positive, earth-flattening women of girth by black men with big enough beds and low enough self-esteem. The conflict between Dante and his brother is less about who gets the last bottle of Steve Martin brand platinum blonde hair dye than it is about giving Dante someone cool to fight. Like a rail of coke, 3 topping pizzas with the cheese crust fillings, and homely women who don't want to die alone, Devil May Cry seems to exist purely for the thrill of its momentary consumption. Mission select is unlocked from the start, weapons are unique and fill different roles, and you actually have use for the maneuverability introduced in the second game. Enemies are visually interesting, represent a genuine threat, and are more satisfying to slap around than my penis, a stepchild, or some combination of both at the same time that you'd normally need to purchase a double-wide trailer to achieve. But Devil May Cry 3 is not all cupcakes and nipple tweaks. Like most Japanese action games, the developers ran out of that metaphorical nut butter that fuels a man's creations 2/3 of the way through the game. Dante jumps from the top of the final area for no reason other than to pad out the length of the game, and you have to backtrack all the way to the top again like a complete fucking idiot. There's no sense of where you're supposed to go in order to advance at times, and by the 3rd time you kill this Amish minivan or these anthropomorphic colostomy bags, you'll wonder if you didn't accidentally boot up Bloody Palace mode by mistake. The style system also limits your options. Since you can only choose one style at a time, you are forced to choose between the ability to dodge and an expanded moveset, which is a bit like saying, look, but don't touch, touch, but don't taste, taste, but no kissing on the lips. Devil May Cry 3 also has a special edition that allows you to play as Dante's very special brother Virgil. Despite having a neat opening cutscene, Virgil winds up replaying the exact same missions as Dante, but with a slightly different set of skills. You don't even get to face off against Dante for an alternate ending, they just skip the story cutscenes and paint the other Virgil red. Overall, Devil May Cry 3 is a damned good game that served as a much needed fresh starting point for the series. Just make sure if you get it on the PC that you also download the Style Switcher mod and Xpadder, or it just doesn't fucking work. Part 4, Devil May Cry 4, released in the year 2008. Dante finally gains the ability to swap styles, multiple guns, and multiple weapons on the fly in Devil May Cry 4. Every aspect of his controls have been refined to near perfection, and Dante is just as cool as ever. Unfortunately, before you can play as Dante, You have to beat the first 2/3 of the game as a teenager whose big boy hair grew in so recently, if you listen closely, you can still hear his balls dropping. While Virgil was so obsessed with power that he only ever busted a nut in a Sparta groupie because she offered to polish his sword, his son Nero is so obsessed with hot dry ginger gash that he constantly calls out his waifu's name, like some crappy shoujo anime protagonist. Every fucking 5 seconds he's screaming out, Kyrie! Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, Kyrie. Yeah, that doesn't get annoying when you hear it screamed 50 times in a row. You might be fooled into thinking Nero's obsession with this brainless receptacle of penis and testicles was meant to parallel Sparta's love for Dante and Virgil's mother, but in reality, Nero's need to mooch the cooch is 100% fueled by the fact that his demonic oven mitt hand makes jerking off about as fun as thrusting into a bag of corn chips or playing Devil May Cry 2! This glorified tutorial character is too stupid to pick up the big glowing orbs at the end of boss fights that could have granted him new weapons, so Dante picks them up later instead. Nero wields a single sword with a lawnmower engine duct taped to it. Sometimes you can activate special moves by timing the pull of a trigger to coincide with a successful strike against an enemy, but triggers aren't exactly designed for precise timing, so good luck getting it to work consistently. Nero also carries one gun that has no stopping power and is made completely useless by his vending machine sticky hand that lets you swing enemies over your head like a retard who caught a cat by the tail. While there's some fun to be had while playing as Nero, he's just a pretender to the throne. Unfortunately, by the time you reach Dante's campaign, you've already seen pretty much everything the game has to offer. You literally run through Nero's levels in reverse and fight bosses that Nero was already supposed to have killed. And if, like me, you play the game on Legendary Dark Knight difficulty first, you won't even see any new enemies as Dante. Sure, the special edition lets you play as Virgil, Lady, and everyone's favorite delish bish Trish, but they play recycled levels too, and don't even get new cutscenes. You would think that since Trish and Lady are supposed to be doing important things off-screen during the main campaign, that should get to play those moments, or at least get to watch the two of them les out. Don't get me wrong, I genuinely like Devil May Cry 4. It is one of the best looking and performing games ever made. I just wish it had a little bit more meat to grab onto. Bosses include a couple of those prostate polywogs I'm always talking about, Charlie Sheen's final form after the AIDS fully kick in, an ornery Second Life avatar who desperately wants to avoid showing up in your next trolling video, the worst pope ever, save for the current pope, a Shrek-faced mulatto moth, and a snake that spits seed in your face like that uncle who traumatic memory suppression has helped you to forget up until this moment when I just reminded you. Enemies include the puppets and lizards from the original Devil May Cry, and the angry hats that occasionally latch onto them. There are birds and fish that turn into swords, flying trash bags who block the camera, tall geese Gundams, 2 flavors of elemental lizards, and fiery dogs that you can squeeze flaming shits out of. Overall, Devil May Cry 4 was an amazing achievement, a near peerless game whose potential would soon be completely squandered. Part 5, DMC Devil May Cry, released in 2013. Hello, I am EmptyHero, and this is DMC Devil May Cry, a game that can FMFCAB, suck my fat cock and balls. Some people say DMC, Dante's man-child, has a bad reputation because Dante's hair is a different color, and fans of the old series are entitled babies that cannot deal with change. The people who say that are, of course, entitled assholes that can't deal with criticism. And since these people hate criticism so much, let's break down the actual problems with this game into 5 parts. Number 1. This game does not need to exist. There are 3 reasons to make a Devil May Cry game. The first would be to continue or expand upon the established lore. In DMC Delightful Minge Crust, the events that unfold are all retreads of events from earlier games, and it serves as more of a soft reboot than a sequel. The second reason would be to improve on the fast-paced action gameplay. In that regard, DMC Dykes Munch Carpets falls short. The third reason, of course, is to generate an easy paycheck, but for the reasons we're about to discuss, that didn't exactly pan out. Number 2. There are very few enemy types, and the ones that we have are poorly designed. Regular enemies look like a fat person sat on an action figure with one butt cheek, a pocket watch with their other butt cheek, then smush the pieces together via some unholy twerking ritual. You'll spend most of the game fighting the same 5 assholes who occasionally get dipped in red or blue paint. Bosses fare a little better, and include the likes of Eurotrash Vagina Face, Bill O'Reilly's Ego, one of those things I keep finding in my dumpster. They smell awful, they taste awful too, and Hillary Clinton. While the bosses are generally visually interesting, they are only weak to Dante's starter weapon Rebellion, and like an ugly girl on prom night, they go down without much of a fight. Which brings us to our next point. 3. The weapons are too similar to each other and aren't exciting to use. Dante's Sword Rebellion is extremely underpowered. Aside from boss fights, you'll only use it to keep your style score inflated while switching between other weapons. The 2 devil weapons, the Fist and the Axe, are practically the same weapon, save for the Axe's long-range attack and the Fist's ability to break through an enemy's guard with a charged attack. The angelic frisbees are great for crowd control, but do little damage, and the angel scythe does so little damage that it's only useful for keeping your style points high while fighting blue enemies. I would also like to note that DMC Delightful Mongoloid Cavalcade continues the series' tradition of guns being absolutely useless, save for knocking harpies out of the sky. Speaking of harpies, let's move on to the next problem. Number 4. Cat moves her mouth when my cock is not inside of it. The scenario and dialogue in DMC Delicious Monkey Cum are okay, and even if you don't like them, you can skip the cutscenes with the push of a button. That is safe for when Cat shows up during gameplay. This Courtney Love understudy had the nasty habit of forcing Dante to walk slowly down empty corridors while she leaks exposition out of her gaping, constantly raped by demons vagina. I can't help but feel like old Dante wouldn't put up with this shit, but the more I think about it, having a hobo girlfriend can be kind of nice. She always knows where to get free soup. You can drop her off literally anywhere at the end of the night, and after you secrete your tincture from your underneath creature into her only redeeming feature, she always has a bottle of Windex and a balled up newspaper on hand to clean up. And speaking of words smeared with semen, let's move on to the final problem with this game. Number 5. The worst public relations I've seen for a video game since literally anything having to do with the mighty number 9. DMC, dilating mother's cornholes Dante, is abrasive at first, but genuinely cares about his brother, his friends, and the plight of humanity in general. The only time we see him act like an asshole is in a scene where his goal is to provoke an angry reaction that will allow him to save the world. Yet, somehow there's this misconception that this version of Dante is a childish, foul-mouthed jerk-off. In reality, this better describes the game's creative design team boss / part-time shit-kicker, Tanim Antonitis. He poisoned the well months before the game's release by actively insulting previous Devil May Cry games, as well as the people that enjoyed them. Well, here's a newsflash, Tanim. If you insult the wonderful, beautiful, sensual people that could have purchased your game, those exceptional, shapely, intelligent people, will probably buy my ebooks, Europe Hillary's Invasion and Europe 2 Barack's Apocalypse instead. Please. You don't see me insulting people that read Naked Lunch, the drummer from Wings insulting people that like the Beatles, or Notch slapping Legos out of the hands of autistic children. I mean, he does that, but you don't see him doing it. Tanim has squandered the works of dozens of talented, hardworking employees, and while I'm not saying this is the best Devil May Cry game because it's not, it's undoubtedly just okay. And it's a shame that all those poor European code monkeys, in addition to having hot sandy Muslim cocks jammed down their throats on a daily basis, are also suffering reduced residuals. DMC Dingus Milk Connoisseurs appears regularly on sale for $5, and at that price, you should give it a chance. I have also heard that the DLC fixes many of the problems that I've mentioned, but to be perfectly honest, after playing this game twice, I'd rather spend those $9 on some tacos.
Fuck.
Part 6. Virgil's Downfall, released in 2013. DMC Devil May Cry VD Virgil's Downfall is the worst type of VD you could ever acquire. Virgil's 15-minute long quest to become the Edge Master Supreme is everything bad from the main campaign compressed into a metaphorical diamond of shit. Despite taking place in hell, Virgil's Downfall borrows less from Dante's Inferno and more from Dante's backlog of recycled enemies and environmental assets. Levels consist entirely of floating pebbles so lazily slapped together that even areas within the DLC are repeated. In the main campaign, Dante is forced to flee from or chase powerful forces, utilizing dynamic level deformation to achieve a fairly impressive sense of urgency. In Virgil's downfall, Virgil warps between floating platforms for no reason other than to pad out the length of the DLC. VD, Vaginal Discharge, continues DMC to poor Mexican children's tradition of wasting buttons due to a complete lack of context sensitivity. For example, dodging up and down are mapped to separate buttons rather than depending on whether or not Virgil is already in the air when the dodge button is pressed. Worse yet, Virgil cannot lock on to specific enemies. To utilize the manual lock-on feature, you'll actually need to purchase the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One exclusive edition of DMC, otherwise known as the "It Won't Be Available as Part of a Humble Bundle, so no one will ever play it" edition. In terms of combat, Virgil's downfall is an unfinished mess. Though Ninja Theory removed the elemental enemy gimmick that plagued the main campaign, they forgot to add a new gimmick to replace it. As a result, you can win most fights via the sort of mindless button mashing one normally witnesses when a retard plays with a Flintstones phone. Instead of having multiple weapons like Dante, Virgil just has a slower Yamato that does more damage, and a faster Yamato that has an incredibly inaccurate moveset. A grand total of 2 new enemies that have 0 thematic connection to Virgil or Hell, and 1 lazily slapped together boss fight round out the experience. From the cutscenes that were made by applying a graphite pen filter to unfinished storyboard drawings, you might have expected Virgil to fight twisted versions of Kat, Dante, and even his own mother. Instead, those confrontations end quickly via cutscenes, and levels just end abruptly. I can't help but feel like a larger DLC was planned, then scrapped when the developers realized they didn't have the talent to pull it off. Considering how inflated the scores were for the main campaign, I did a little research on how this DLC was initially received, and much to my surprise, the usual places glanced over the sloppy movesets and the lack of new content in order to gush over the poetic story. On paper, Virgil's downfall concerns a narcissist failing to come to terms with the insecurities that fuel his desire for power, but the dialogue is so rushed and amateurish that Virgil just comes off as a pissy teenager with mommy issues instead. And to be perfectly honest, it's hard to take Virgil's suffering seriously when he looks like a Super Saiyan taking a shit for half of the DLC. While I previously had a good laugh at the bribe-accepting shills who called the original campaign's writing Shakespearean, I was absolutely disgusted to find out that multiple professional reviewers lovingly compared VD Volvodrupich to T.S. Eliot's poem, The Hollow Men. This is such a mind-bogglingly stupid claim that I can't help but take this opportunity to recite The Hollow Men in its entirety while unedited footage of Virgil's downfall plays. If you can find any similarities, please write them down, wait for your check from Ninja Theory to clear, then post them in the comments below. Mr. Kurtz, he dead. A penny for the old guy. We are the Hollow Men. We are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. Alas, our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless, as wind in dry grass, or rat's feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. Shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. Those who have crossed with direct eyes to deaths of the kingdom remember us, if at all, not as lost violent souls, but only as the hollow men, the stuffed men. Eyes I dare not meet in dreams in death's dream kingdom, these do not appear. There the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. There is a tree swinging, and voices are in the wind singing more distant and more solemn than a fading star. Let me be no nearer in death's dream kingdom. Let me also wear such deliberate disguises. Rat's coat, crow's skin, crossed staves in the field behaving as the wind behaves. Not nearer, not that final meeting in the twilight kingdom. This is the dead land. This is the cactus land. Here the stone images are raised. Here they receive the supplication of a dead man's hand under the twinkling of a fading star. Is it like this in death of the kingdom? Waking alone at the hour when we are trembling with tenderness? Lips that would kiss fond prayers to broken stone. The eyes are not here. There are no eyes here in this valley of dying stars. In this hollow valley, this broken jaw of our lost kingdom. In this last of meeting places, we grope together and avoid speech. Gathered on this beach of the tumid river, sightless, unless the eyes reappear as the perpetual star. Multifoliate rows of death's twilight kingdom, the hope only of empty men. Here we go round the prickly pear. Prickly pear, prickly pear. Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. Between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response falls the shadow. Life is very long. Between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. For thine is, life is, for thine is the... This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Now what the fuck that had to do with Devil May Cry makes no sense to me. Virgil's downfall wasn't a metaphor for the longings of desperate men, the hopelessness of unachievable goals, or the inevitability of death. It was a hastily assembled collection of cliches that would make even the most cringe-inducing deviant art posters shake their massive water-filled heads. As a result, I can't say where Devil May Cry will go next. If another game is ever made, it can't follow the reboot since so few people liked it. It can't directly follow up on Devil May Cry 2, since having Dante stomping around in hell would literally be Dante's Inferno, and EA already beat Capcom to the punch. Odds are, Devil May Cry 6 would either be a prequel starring Sparta, a sequel starring Nero as he follows his dad and uncle into hell, or maybe they could go in an opposite direction, and instead of being a big macho guy fighting demons, you could play as a hot thought fighting angels instead. Well guys, thanks for listening. If you like my video, you could subscribe, you could tweet about it, you could buy one of my novels or audiobooks, or you could send me a tasteful photograph of your buttock cheeks. Either way, thanks for your time and goodbye! Finally, after aeons of waiting, the time has come and so have I in my underpants. Hey everybody, it's your good old pal EmptyHero, and today, in that perfect twilight period between the initial release of a Capcom game and the Hyper Turbo edition of the same game that will be announced just moments after I post this video, we're going to discuss everyone's favorite 5th installment of the Devil May Cry franchise, Devil May Cry The. Now I know what you're thinking, but EmptyHero, you lusciously lickable pat of butter of a man. Wasn't DMC Deportable Mangina's Child the 5th Devil May Cry game? And to that I say, what was that? I can't hear you. In this Devil May Cry, Daddy finally came home with that pack of cigarettes he set out to acquire 20 years ago edition. Players will gather the metaphorical fruits of Virgil's literal hands-off approach to fathership. Gone are the cynical conceits and ham-fisted attempts at political commentary, which made the previous DMC such an ice pop up the pooper to play, and in their place, expertly crafted gameplay and lighthearted fun have returned. At the outset of our climb up a tree that sucks the life out of the room faster than a girlfriend at a LAN party, players will skip halfway into the story, saving the expositionary cutscenes until just after a completely incomprehensible boss fight. Following this failed foray in furious floating fluorite fisticuffs, everyone's favorite drunkle appears and reminds Nero that now that his big boy hair has come in, he no longer holds a spot in the amateur naked wrestling league Dante once hosted in his basement. Nero and a mysterious Hot Topic clerk then beat a retreat like I beat my meat, not in the least bit discreet and out on the street, and the prologue comes to an ominous end. 1 month later, the roots of the vampiric tree have sucked Redgrave City's inhabitants drier than my girlfriend's between-the-knees ham and cheese after she walked in on me talking to myself in Meatwad's voice while taking a poop. Now look here, boy. I just can't help imagining magical meatballs when I'm already squatting down and making smelly sausage. Nero and his token minority chauffeur, Nico, also known as Van Horison in certain circles, specifically in the ones who have seen this Tupelo Honey's back alley jelly roll and brown eye girl, hurtle towards the base of the MacGuffin tree while treating some bugs like Berliners who dared to stand outside at a Christmas market and discussing their daddy issues like a couple of college freshmen who just sucked their first non-familial cock. Nero then bails out the most ineffective army of bug chasers since Antifa and the game proper begins. Outside of a new game plus, Nero has lost his devil arm due to an unexpected sneeze while giving his uncle Dante a shoulder-deep prostate exam. And instead of molesting enemies with his usual blue raspberry rubdown, everyone's favorite humanoid tutorial is now reduced to relying on sophisticated marital aids to give Kyrie the shocker off screen instead. The stupid fucking rubbing mechanic that I can never get to work reliably returns, and though charging shots for the blue rose is about as fun as charging cum shots to the blue waffle, Nero's basic moveset, occasional lucky rev, and vast array of mechanical arms make for a pretty fun if somewhat differently abled character whom players won't fully come to appreciate until they wear their fingers down to nubs, trying to convince Adam's short bus driver's Pokemon to attack something other than Dante. This pen initial level culminates in a laughably easy showdown versus an oversaturated maxi pad armed with the most threatening blood-engorged columns of flesh, since my own imbuer of lifelong hatred of men got tired of me slapping it around 3 times a day, spat in my eye, and grabbed a knife off the kitchen table to cut me with. "And I'll do it again, senor." Quiet, you! A flashback then reveals the moment that Nero received the customary Skywalker family high five, so that a mysterious stranger, whom every player in the world will instantly recognize as being Virgil, can finally wipe his own ass with the torturously inadequate one-ply toilet paper they supply in hell without getting poo on his own fingers. The following level forces Nero to confront the highly sensitive subject of architectural puberty by slashing vines that sprout up in the strangest places, jam horrifically oversized deer ticks into an entwife's cunt, and dodge more Grim Reapers than Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg during cold season, because he's too damn stupid to simply circumvent the demonic doorway barriers by kicking through the sheetrock of an adjacent wall. Atop this leaning tower of pizzazz, a fat bastard who wants you to get in his bella attempts a typical Kelsey Grammer parking job and is thwarted by a classic Buster Keaton defense. The most desperate fight over a fruit since the family of the artist formerly known as Prince sued each other for custody of his ashes so they could sell them as glitter follows. And although this degenerate vor fetishist has imbibed more rock than the aforementioned deceased molester of guitars, and has a party in his tummy so yummy that even Saint Vivek would stare in awe at his bountiful belly magic, Bulimia Kills, and Bony Hawk Panther Pro Skater appears to give Goliath the Rosemary Kennedy treatment with his Big Daddy Kane. V for Vianetta then explained that they must destroy the Clipoth tree's roots as efficiently as if it were the Devil May Cry series and they were DMC, Digital Manchurian Candidate. Everyone's favorite one-drop rule violating mystery machinist then takes a break from painting Live, Laugh, Love on the interior wall of the van she lives in down by the river in order to jam a piece of Goliath's foreskin into a rubber glove and sell it back to Nero for a reasonable profit. Mission 3 finds our shoujo anime lover boy fighting lizards in a sewer like a Floridian who dropped his wallet down a grating, then impersonating a bookish lesbian couple by violently scissoring in the library, and teaching this brainless pigeon woman about flooring via cranial osmosis. This feather-faced motherflocker's biological clock is ticking down so hard that her demonic homing ovaries lock onto the sperms soaked into the back of Nero's pants, and Artemis's defeat serves as an odd reversal of reality. What with this monster having a beautiful lady hidden on the inside when usually the exact opposite is true. Mission 4 begins Devil May Cry 5's slow descent into madness by tasking the player with guiding a half-cripple who's, quite honestly, ashier than Michelle Obama's balls, through an urban neighborhood without allowing him to get randomly punched in the back of the head for no discernible reason, as he does his best impression of Israel by tricking his subhuman pets into fighting his enemies for him, while he occasionally enables the nightmarish black golem that will ultimately destroy him. At first, controlling V and his minions can feel a little bit like flying a kite using only your dick, but eventually, zipping around the map like Mario holding onto an Alf prostate while quoting William Blake and poking enemies with a stick becomes a second nature that everyone will happily cast aside the moment Dante becomes available to play. V's initial level caps off with a showdown against a glorified worm and an apple whose flabby Michelin man skin and tendency to flop on other people's faces reminds me of that awkward transitionary period between my own second and third circumcisions. Another root then crumbles, revealing a gigantic four-legged pain in the ass in the distance that V graciously leaves for a less basic bitch of a character to handle, and, like me reading robust Rubenesque Rumpus's Quarterly, the level comes to an end. The This level places Dr. Doolittle Dick aboard the demonic shipping yard where unsold copies of Devil May Cry 2 are stored. Weird blue grabber arms attempt to grab Shadow by the pussy, and a slightly less horrific version of Hillary Clinton guards the exit. Outside the shipping yard, Malphas, the chicken-headed and ass hoe, who had to carve a gash in her face since she has a literal baby cock between her legs, instructs the level's boss to hunt down Sparta's sword, just in case someone utilizes it to open a can of beans and brap in her face, as I would have done since I'm a true gentleman who knows how to romance the ladies. The elder Garyon Knigget then somewhat competently recreates the Thunder Horse boss from Devil May Cry 3 before running off like the secret bitch that's hidden inside of him. Over in Who Gives a Shitville, Nero pops the back knee of a Metal Gear who moves as slowly as I do after shooting some of the blood I shed out back into my veins so that it doesn't go to waste, while Lady attempts to ward off the hordes of source filmmaker porn perverts by blinding them with a precision lens flare reflected off of her inadequate buttock cheeks. And believe you me, lady, you start popping that pussy phosphorescence, and I'm just gonna start wearing sunglasses even at night. Check literal mate. Players then plunge Panther Foist into the populous perils of public transportation, what with the filth breeding on the platforms, the jerks running up the down escalators, and the super gross chewed up gum all over the floor. Ew! And the 7th mission caps off with the most malicious mobile home melee. Since that time I accidentally sneezed while squatting on my neighbor's trailer hitch, snapping it off the frame and alerting my neighbor's entire family, who came running out from their Christmas dinner to unfairly prosecute my prostatular proclivities. So I got on all fours and triple burrito blasted that hitch back at them like a cannonball, killing the entire family and unfortunately inadvertently lowering the resale value of my own trailer in the process. Dang. Like crabs in a pot, these people. The 8th mission begins with Nero being sealed inside an elaborate recreation of a Ronnie James Dio album cover, clapping the cheeks of a goat harder than a lonely jihadist, becoming more of a human tampon than Tanim Antonidius, then finally returning to the pulsating palace of pooper-implanted plasma where our journey began. A rematch versus Urizen's kidney stone ensues that will make you wonder why Nero doesn't simply trick Urizen into slurping up some A's blood in order to finish off the joke by coughing on him. Following another bullshit scripted loss, Urizen screams, "No one makes me bleed my own blood! Nobody!" Then attempts squeezing Nero until his testes finally pop out of his abdomen like 1.5 lumpy ping pong balls. Kyosuke Date from that Soul Taker anime no one has seen but me then appears, and the the events unfolding on screen become so embarrassingly Japanese that the English localization team forced Capcom to end the level before Urizen could use his tentacles, 10 tickles, to suddenly transform this game into DMC Boku no Nero. A flashback then reveals that the Obama administration's persecution of small conservative businesses has hit Devil May Cry so hard that defunct rock band Dante has had to take on a black pimp to find him work, and perhaps more devilish still, that Dante wants no parts of a newly legal girl simply because, unlike Trish, she does not look exactly like this literal motherfucker's mother. V then introduces himself as a pun-loving yet wealthy client, leaving players who have beaten the game to wonder where the hell he got the money for this gig, let alone the pleather sleeveless trench coat and the exact same crocodile tooth necklace I utilized to poke a motherfucker's eyes out with if they picked a fight with me back when I was 12. Back in the current, present, forward to the past, flash forward to whatever the hell time this is supposed to be, V sets out on an epic quest to reclaim the demon sword Sparta so that he too can cut open a can of beans and fulfill his filial fate by fumigating a fetching female's fallopian flaps with his full-on flatus fulicide. The biggest two-tongued pig since Jennifer Hepler inadvertently split her own tongue while trying to bite into her reflection in a mirror attacks, and after clearing out some catacombs since the developers were too cowardly to send V through some highly dangerous dogacombs, or at least a cat of brush instead, V battles a horde of handsome ball grabbers to reach the resting place of both Dante's smashed up boy Pucci and the aforementioned Sparta sword. Another goddamn flashback begins just as V attempts to do to Dante what I accidentally did to my dick that one time I got a boner at Thanksgiving dinner while checking out my cousin's new mail-order Somalian bride and carving the fried chicken, wherein Dante's mother places a young Dante deeper into the closet than Gloria Vanderbilt did to her son Anderson Cooper, and the forces of Satan descend on the Sparta household but fail to find Dante because he also pulled his feet under some blankets and closed his eyes for peak invisibility. Dante's future fat fuels and ran off screen in search of Virgil and dies off faster than any chance of connecting this retcon with the backstory of DMC, demonstrable mediocre chapter. Dimikov then flashes back again and the Uncle Dante Fun Fest finally begins. Let me just preface this segment of the game by stating plainly that after slogging through the first act of Dimikov as Nero and V, playing as Dante feels like becoming the retard from Flowers for Algernon, suddenly awakening from his trisomy 21 induced stupor, wiping the shit from the front of his pants, and breakdancing a bunch of demons to death. In this mid-game prologue to the prologue, a spinning chaos lizard then tempts Dante into emulating Chris Farley's character from Tommy Boy by reciting Lee Lorelai Luke Rook, I am your father, into his blades, while Dante's harem of butter-faced war trophies get their faces bopped like bongos harder than Ricky Ricardo used to Me Too Lucille Ball after she missed the line. Surprising only the most bold-cutted among us, Dante calls Urizen out as being Virgil instantly by triggering him with the operative phrase, jackpot, and yet another fight at Urizen's Big Rock Candy Fountain ensues with predictable results. Dante's shitty second place trophy to Alistar is broken, V reprimands Nero for being nearly as useless as V's legs, and Dante's jism prisms become forever really tied up in loving it. The following level introduces a subtle nod to the events of September 11th, 2001, what with Dante blowing up skyscrapers from the inside, and the revelation that a hellish Jude was behind it all along. Then, like myself after breaking into a college campus and accidentally writing advanced theoretical mathematical equations on the chalkboard of a Sociology 101 class, Dante bitch slaps the bitch out of an enraged female-to-male transsexual so hard that it turns back into a voluptuous blonde woman wrapped only in a blanket, which, for the uninitiated, is a little move that I like to call goodwill cunting. Cavalerio Angelo's essence then fuses with a motorcycle for some reason, and Dante rides away on it with Trish, which is a little bit like getting a piggyback ride from your girlfriend after beating up on her. This motorcycle doubles as a slow-moving but highly damaging weapon later, and how does it play, you ask? Well, I guess you could say that I really, really like it. V then mournfully admits his origins as a humanoid foreskin Virgil cut from himself while literally internalizing his edge, thus separating the V from Virgil and realizing his true demonic potential as Urgil. Somehow, Trish's only response is to tell V, who is literally crumbling before her due to not knowing about the restorative powers of cocoa butter, that he needs to shut up about his gay feelings around her since she's not actually his mommy, despite looking exactly like her and occasionally breastfeeding his degenerate brother Dante. The 12th mission is a bit of a clusterfuck, wherein Dante clashes with hordes of furious furries that floop around the firmament faster than my flaunted phallus that one time when I fell down an elevator shaft while trying to twerk off a couple of strands of that valuable copper wiring used to power the lights, lost my balance and resorted to harnessing the propeller power of my own pirouetting pecker to cushion my fall. Logically, this is done in order to gather blood for the 4 waiting pools, which unlock a path that leads to Dante's childhood home for some reason, wherein Dante stabs himself with the broken hilt of rebellion, finally realizing his true potential as a dreaded double trigger for that double baked-in demon goodness. This all serves to raise an important litany of questions, none of which are answered by the game, including why didn't Virgil go double devil all those times Dante stabbed him with rebellion? Why didn't Dante poop out a V-baby every time Virgil sliced off one of his beefaroni nips with the Yamato? And perhaps, most important of all, why didn't Dante skip out on all that fighting and just fill the pools with piss? Hell, he spent 2 months sleeping, so you know he has enough in his bladder. And if Dante's like me at all, his piss would have blood in it anyway, so the pool wouldn't even know the difference. The battle against Ramen Ouroboros Virgil then resumes, and thanks to his complete ass-pull powers, Dante comes away momentarily victorious. That is, until Jack's mean bean machine stalk crumbles and Virgil vamooses to the produce department to collect his prize. Our ensemble cast then collides on screen for the first time, and Nicoletta spills more spaghetti upon meeting Dante than a fat Italian committing seppuku, after briefly mentioning her grandmother who crafted Dante's iconic pistols and, oh yeah, her father who Dante brutally murdered in Devil May Cry 4. She gives everyone's favorite smooth criminal with the deadliest hat since real-life fedoras cause millions of white American men to never reproduce. Dante can either use this odd job mod job to transmogrify his red orb stockpile into a bullshit comet that kills everything in one hit, or to combine the powers of Michael Jackson with Mario Odyssey in order to first possess enemies, then molest them on the Ferris wheel in his backyard, while the entire music industry watches from behind a bush and nods approvingly. The 13th mission can be played utilizing any of the 2 characters people might actually want to play as, while showcasing both the promise of a multiplayer Devil May Cry and the complete futility of it, since most of the times you actually match up with another player, they completely ignore helping you combat the enemies and sprint to the next area as fast as they can instead. The basic writing necessity of splitting up our team then causes the floor to fall out from under our friends faster than a Chinese escalator, and the 14th mission finds V letting a slut get inside of his head and losing all of his pets faster than comedian Bill Burr. A metaphorical boss rush ensues, which ends with V nearly being pecked to pieces by an overgrown chicken McNugget. Fortunately for V, as well as players who'd like to actually directly control their inputs for the next boss fight, Nero has mastered the fine art of mid-air chain grabbing just in time to turn that turducken into a turfuckin' by scrambling her eggs from the inside. And in my humble opinion, you could even say that it was over easy. Wink. Meanwhile, within the snowman sphincter located at the top of the bottom of the tree, players pass into a doggy-dog world where the Cerebus King screams, "You shall not pass!" as though Dante were Caitlyn Jenner asking how he looked in one of his Janet Reno hand-me-down dresses, then unsheathes his push-up pop popsicle knot, gives Dante the cold shoulder in addition to, cold everything else, and proves that, unlike this humanoid milk dud, he can indeed break these cuffs. Ah! After leaving this pick of the litter with a prick up the shitter, his tongue frozen to his own balls and requiring a snow cone to keep him from chewing his own open wounds, Dante retrieves his ice chucks from Devil May Cry 3, and Nero comes to the sudden realization that V has become crustier than a 13-year-old boy's pants after his parents left him alone for the first time without first burying their hand lotion in the yard. The finale sets off with Virgil's humanoid mommy issues crying about how he wanted to be protective and loved so badly that he devised a scheme to suck the life essence out of tens of thousands of innocent human beings rather than just adopting a dog from his local animal shelter, or garnering himself a fat girlfriend by lying and telling her that she's pretty and doesn't at all smell like a garbage bag full of old hot dogs that have been laying out in the sun when we all know goddamn well that she does, Roberta. I filled up that kiddie pool thinking you'd finally take something resembling a bath, but all you did was pop the tubes, squish my son into a child supportless pancake, thanks for that by the way, then transform the water into gravy with the runoff from your front butt. And that's why I love you, girl. Atop the tree, where only a rusted washer and dryer set, tipped over sideways in the overgrown grass, would have made the ensuing front yard white trash slap fight more authentic, Virgil's quest for blast processing culminates as he consumes so much fiber from the devilish Dingleberry MacGuffin that he instantly poops off his goofy-ass spaghetti armor and in the process goes full demon. Never go full demon. A full 5 minutes later, the power unga bunga that Virgil has thirsted for his entire adult life fails him, and for the second time in the last 5 years, Capcom plagiarizes one of my novels by having V literally recreate the third-to-last page from my novel, Europe, Hillary's Invasion, and no, I'm not joking. These fuckers owe me a royalty check or at least a free copy of DMC HD Trilogy. Anyways, one Carlos Mencia writing school inspired plot twist later, and Virgil is back, baby, and more Aspergian than ever. After realizing that Dante requires a fap nap and a post-lunch brap, Virgil thanks Nero for lending him a hand earlier, then teleports to the final stage, where he ponders if his place had been switched on the day Mundus's forces attacked. Would his fate have been different? Would he have Dante's life, and Dante his? Would Virgil eat his toast, butter side up, and Dante genocide thousands of innocent human beings? Back in the Maury Povich recording studio, Dante reveals that, on top of cutting off Nero's arm and using it to give himself satanic strangers, that Virgil raw-dogged Nero's mom and never even called her back. Then, as with many unexpected deaths, Dante is left to deal with V's pets, and now that they are no longer held back by V's good intentions, Dante is forced to flip that bird, smash that pussy, and double reverse Jew that golem. It's a fairly cathartic confrontation that serves as the perfect palate cleanser for the after-school teenage melodrama that follows, which culminates in Nero jumping out of the back of the Minotaurus because the overpowering aroma of 3 steaming hot thought twats activated his automatic virginity defense mechanisms. Dante and Virgil face off to see whose hair plugs are the strongest in an immensely satisfying recreation of their showdown at the end of Devil May Cry 3, which is only briefly interrupted by Virgil suddenly understanding the real reason he chopped off Nero's hand was because he was actually the kid's father, and in this way, he'd never have to play catch with the little nerd. Off-screen, Nero utilizes a conveniently placed payphone to booty call Kyrie, who has thankfully been left in the kitchen where she belongs this entire game, then finally realizes his true potential as a special snowflake Inuyasha clone by screaming, "Daddy, no!" and punching out his uncle like every other young man who realized that there's no such thing as two-man push-ups and that he was actually molested. In this grand finale, a victory lap for the franchise, Nero slaps around his aging father harder than a bored Jamaican orderly at an old folks' home, and following this familial fisting, a couple of mid-credit cutscenes and battles find Dante and Virgil stealing themselves in, pardon my French, heck, in order to prevent demons from pouring into the human world. One might find this bittersweet at first, until they remember that Dante and Virgil have both been sealed in HE double hockey dicks multiple times, and there's pretty much nothing stopping them from popping back to Earth, utilizing the hole in Hillary Clinton's tongue as a demonic portal. Overall, Devil May Cry V experiments with new play styles while returning to old favorites, and even makes a couple of sly nods to the more fat-tongued genetic embarrassments of the series. If we never visit the franchise again, Dimikova will serve as a proper swan song and easily the second best entry in the series after Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition. Well, that's it for today's videos, my friends. Was it good for you, bae? I'd like to thank you kawaii babes for sticking it out with me while I've been swamped with real-life work and the flu for the past couple of months, and to give an especially big, wet, and sloppy thanks to my top Patreons, Tickus, Shadowcat and Henskelion, as well as my top YouTube member, Nathan. If you'd like to check out my novels, Discord, or some of my side accounts, clickable links are provided in the description directly below this video. And if you're a first-time EmptyHero viewer, do us both a favor by pulling my devil trigger, as well as that subscribe button and the little dingly-dangle bell next to it. Thanks for coming out, everybody, and God bless us, everyone.